Hey everybody, I noticed some of you guys had some problems or didn't even notice that sometimes you need to do some other considerations when you're doing the compositing process. So I decided to make a tutorial for all of you. So I decided to go over the creation of the wireframe pass out of Arnold, and also I'm going to show you some other quick tips and tricks when you're working on this project. So I'm using Andrew's project as something to show you all of those progresses. So here's the image that he wanted to work on, and then he actually brought up these two characters, he posed them, and as you can see, he also modeled the bench here. So the bench here exists in the photo. However, since we want to have the shadows to be interacting with, the shadow of the characters to be interacting with the bench, he decided to model the actual bench. All right, so let's see what are the process for making this photo to work with these CG elements. This is the first render that we have in the master layer. As you can see, the plane here is sitting here. We are having the bench. The background here is actually applied to the image plane. Ignore this black bar here. I'm still not sure how I can get rid of this stretching happening on the image plane. However, it doesn't matter because you're going to do the compositing in After Effects. So this is the master layer, as I said, and let me open up the render setup. So we currently are seeing the master layer, and if I switch to the beauty layer, as you can see, he included the characters geo as well as the lights. He actually included lots of other stuff, but I decided to delete them so I can show you what is the process for that. So the lights here are included in a collection here because we wanted to, in the beauty layer, we didn't want to have the lights to cast any shadows. So we will create a collection for that, and then on the collection that includes all the light sources, we will create an override for AI for the cast shadows of the lights, and we will turn them off. So in this beauty layer, we will not see any shadows. Let me actually bring it up here. So as you can see, there's no shadow on the ground, so nothing is actually, it's all about the beauty layer. Also in the shadows layer, everything including the bench is supposed to be here because the bench is supposed to receive the shadows. So if I show you the render, you can see that the bench is here. Again, forget about this this image plane. Let me actually turn it off because it's a little bit distracting. All right, so here's the shadow layer. The bench is actually existing in this shadow layer as opposed to the beauty layer because we don't want to have the bench to be showing up in the beauty layer. So here's the beauty layer. All right, and again, it doesn't have any shadows here because we have created this override on the lights. All right, so you might say, okay, that's good, we can go ahead and save these files as EXR format and then bring them into After Effects. But there are a couple notes that we have to take care of first before going to After Effects. One of them is the shadow layer itself. So for the shadow layer, if I go back to the shadow layer, you'll see that we included the bench here, we included the plane to receive the shadow, we included the bench here to receive the shadows. However, since in our original photo we already have the bench, which means that it's already creating the shadows, these shadows underneath it. If we include the bench in the shadow layer, we will get another extra shadow which is produced in CG. If we remove the bench, we will not get these shadows. We will not get these shadows on the bench coming from the character. So in order to solve it, we have to include the bench in the layer. However, we don't want it to cast any shadows. We only want the bench to receive the shadows from the character and not cast any shadows on the ground. So in order to be able to create an override for the bench, I have to actually create another collection just for the bench. Let me close this photo. I'm gonna remove the bench from this from we are actually in the shadow layer. I'm gonna remove the bench from this collection. I intentionally did that because I wanted to show you what's the process. So I'm gonna remove the bench from this collection, and then I'm gonna create another collection. I'm gonna name it just the bench. I'm gonna add the bench in this collection. All right, so it's still inside the shadow layer, but for only this collection I'm gonna create an override on the bench on one of these geometries, which is only the bench. I'm gonna create an override on the render stats cast shadows, create an absolute override, then I'm gonna select the override and check it off. And now if I go back to my render view, you will see that the bench is going to be existing in the layer. It's receiving these shadows from the characters, but it's not casting any shadows anymore on the ground. All right, so we solved this one. So when we bring it into compositing, we will add them to our compositing. It will add these shadows to the layer on the actual bench in the photo, but it will not add any extra shadows on the ground. So this is one of them. The other one is talking about a reflection that we have in the photo. So if I bring back the photo again, here's the actual photo. You'll see that on the ground we are having these blurred reflections. So we have to somehow make sure that if we are having, or if we are adding anything else in this scene that is interacting or sitting on the ground, we are supposed to see something like this, some reflection like this. So we have to somehow create that. So in order to create that, I'm going to go to my beauty layer this time. In the beauty layer, I'm going to add the plane, add the floor in the beauty layer. So here's my beauty layer. I'm going to add the floor there. So I'm going to create another collection for that, just for the floor. I'm going to add the ground in this collection. All right. So when I add it, it will start showing up in the render. However, we just want to have the floor just to create the reflections for us. We don't want to see it. So we will use the same shader, or the same type of shader that we were using for creating the shadows. So I'm going to create a shader override for this collection. I'm going to create a shader override. And I'm not using the AI matte shader that I have created already for the shadow layer. I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to create a new AI matte shader, or AI shader matte. Yeah, ShadowMatte, I'm sorry. I'm going to create a new one, and for its attributes I'm going to go here and check indirect specular. All right, so as soon as I do that, the plane itself will disappear because I have created created that override shader for that, which is a ShadowMatte shader. And then since I have enabled the indirect specular, I'm gonna see these reflections. So let me actually uncheck it, and you can see what's the difference. First, the plane will be disappearing just because I have applied this ShadowMatte shader to that. And then as soon as I enable the indirect specular, it will show me these reflections. Now I'm having the same attributes that I previously had for any given AI standard shader, which is playing with the roughness of the shadows. So this is the place that you will go and double check with your background and make sure that you are using the same roughness, or you are matching the roughness of these reflections to the reflections that you see in your original photo. So I'm going to bring up the photo itself. I'm trying to match the roughness to this one. So I'm going to maybe increase the roughness just a bit. All right, I guess it's close enough. For now, that's good. So we took care of that. But the problem here is that if you are using AOVs, these reflections will not show up in the specular pass at all. So in order to be able to see them or get them out of this EXR file format that we're going to save, you have to include another AOV, which is same as this indirect specular. So no matter if you are having a specular pass here or not, the indirect specular that you get from the ShadowMatte shader will not show up in that pass. So again, in order to see that, you have to include specular indirect in your passes. Now if I go back to my render view, this is my BOT, and now this is my indirect specular, right? So it will only show up in the specular indirect pass that you can use in your extractor format, and then you can extract it from your EXR file. So I'm gonna just increase the intensity of this layer just so you can see that. And that's it. There is one more step that we have to take care of, which is when we bring these renders into compositing, this character is supposed to be sitting on the bench and his leg is supposed to be behind the bench. So we somehow need to have the bench to be included in the beauty layer, but just act as a matte object, as a matte element. So it will just create a mask that will hide these parts of the leg of the character that are behind the bench. So I'm going to go back to my render setup. In my beauty render layer, I'm going to create a new collection. Not here, not a render layer, but a new collection. Let me delete this. I'm going to create a new collection. I'm going to add the bench in the collection. And for this collection, I'm going to create another ShadowMatte shader override, I guess. Yeah. So I'm going to create a new shader override. The same ShadowMatte shader, but a new one. And for this one, I'm just going to leave it as it is because I want to just block the character, and that's it. So now if I switch between the alpha channel and the beauty channel, you will see that the bench now is included in this layer. It's not interacting with anything. It's only there, and it's blocking or covering up the leg of the character which is behind the bench. One more thing that you should also make sure that you take care of is that now that we added this bench here, even though we are applying that ShadowMatte shader on it, and it will just only block the leg of the character, and it will just render out as a black object. If I go back to my alpha channel, you're seeing that it's again producing these shadows here. So just to be safe, we have to go back to our render setup, and on the collection that we had for the bench. So here's the collection that includes the bench that we have applied this ShadowMatte override on it. I'm going to create 2 more overrides on the bench so it will not cast or receive any shadows. So the collection that contains the bench, the layer is selected. All right, the bench is selected. Create an absolute override. Okay, now it's turning orange. Cool. Check off that, and then go back to my render, hit render. The bench is here. The shadow is no longer created. It's blocking the leg, so everything is good to go. Awesome. One more thing that I wanted to talk about is how to create a AO pass, or a AOV, or ambient occlusion AOV. So the name of ambient occlusion shader is also a contact shadow, which is creating shadows for areas that we are having contacts between 2 geometries. That's why it's called contact shadow. So for example, in this case, if I'm having these characters standing or sitting on the ground or on the bench, I have to see some contact shadows here, 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 and any place that these characters are actually close to any, for example, if they're close to a wall, I have to include or add a wall here. So when I create an AO pass, I'm gonna see some contact shadows here. So in order to do that, I noticed that some of you guys were actually using your beauty layer to create a contact shadow. However, since you didn't have any plane here because you didn't want to see the shadows, I mean, usually the beauty pass doesn't include the plane itself. So let's go back to the original position that we were for the beauty pass without having those specular reflections. I'm gonna, for now, maybe, which one is that? Yeah, okay. This one was creating the indirect specular on the floor. So I'm gonna remove that. So originally, I think I have to update my render. Yeah, here we go. So usually when we are in the beauty layer, we are gonna see something like this. The floor is not there because we are only interested in the color information or in the beauty information. So usually we don't have the floor here, which means that if I use this layer to create my ambient occlusion or contact shadows, I'm gonna miss some of these contact shadows here, which are actually the crucial part of creating the contact shadows. So if you are in this situation and you're not having your plane inside this layer, you can actually use your shadow layer, because that includes not only the characters or your CG elements, but also the plane that is receiving the shadows. So you can use this beauty layer and you can enable the contact shadow AOV in that layer. So I'm gonna bring up the render settings. I'm going to add, let me go back to the master layer. I'm gonna stop this render for now. I'm going to go back to my master layer. In my render settings, I'm going to add another pass here, which is for creation of the contact shadows. And if you remember it, we had to make it manually. So I'm going to create a new AOV here. And I'm going to create a shader for that, which is AI ambient occlusion. All right. Then in the shadow layer, I'm going to, or in the beauty layer, I'm going to disable that AOV. So I'm going to disable the AOV for the beauty layer. And I'm going to enable that, which is, I think I'm already enabled because by default it's inside the master layer. So it's already enabled, which means that now if I render the shadow layer, not only I'm going to get the shadows, I hope it's going to work. Here we go. So the AO is showing up. And if I go to my ShadowMatte, the ShadowMatte is, I guess, working. And if I go back to my beauty pass, beauty render layer, it does not include the floor, which for some cases, this would be the correct way to do that. However, if you are having some trouble extracting the contact shadows from your shadow layer, another safer solution would be creating another render layer here just for creating the AO pass, which does include not only the characters and the bench, but also the floor or the ground plane that we have in the scene. Remember, the contact shadows are supposed to create some contact shadows wherever we are having a contact between our CG elements and the plane that we add to receive the shadows. So remember to do that. I also wanted to talk about how you can create a wireframe pass. So let's go and see how we can create a wireframe pass. For creation of a wireframe pass, you can actually use, again, the AOVs directly. So for example, I'm going to use the beauty layer, or maybe for this case, it's better to, I guess, since the bench is not a CG element, so I don't want to see the wireframes of the bench. I don't want to see the wireframes of the plane. I only want to see the wireframes of the characters. So I guess for this case, it's better to create a new render layer gonna name it wireframe, and I'm going to only bring in or load in the characters in it. So I'm gonna create a new collection, add these 2 characters to that. So I just want to see the wireframes of the CG elements that I'm adding, not the bench. Again, the bench is just there for receiving the shadows. The plane is only there just to receive the shadows. So it's not needed to see the wireframes of those 2 pieces of geometries. So here, same as the creation of AOV, the creation of contact shadows or AO pass, I can create a shader override. And this time for the shader, I'm going to use a pre-made shader that we can use in Arnold, which is called Wireframe, I guess, AI Wireframe. All right. And now if I go back and render, it's gonna render out a wireframe pass for me. All right, so you'll see that it's rendering out the wireframe, but I mean, by default, there are some considerations. I mean, some considerations that you have to take care of when you're creating a wireframe pass, which is, as you can see, it will by default render out the wireframes in triangle mode. So in order to solve it, you will select the AI wireframe that you have created, and here you have a type which is polygons. And this way you can only see polygons, quads of your geometry, even if your geometry doesn't have any triangles. By default, this AI wireframe shader will render out the pass in triangles. So make sure that you will switch it back to polygons. Another major or important thing that I wanted to talk about this wireframe pass is that, unfortunately, the current wireframe shader that we can use in Arnold is only able to or is actually rendering out your wireframes depending on the smooth mode or non-smooth mode that you're having for your geometry. So if you're having a low poly geometry and you're trying to create a wireframe for that, let me actually show you. I'm going to create this cylinder here. I'm going to bring it up just a bit. And I'm going to go back. All right, so I added the cylinder here. And as you can see, it's rendering out the wireframe of that. However, the issue with this current method is that if you have your objects in smooth mode, so I'm gonna select the cylinder and hit 3 on my keyboard, then go back to my render view, you will see that it will include all those subdivisions that it will add under the hood when it's trying to smooth this geometry. This is not a perfect way to create a wireframe in Arnold. I fortunately was not able to find a proper way or easy way to create a wireframe pass of a scene in a smooth mode without showing all of these extra wireframes. So I'm still not sure how we can solve it. So for now, if you want to render out your wireframes, make sure that you are going into a non-smooth mode of your objects and then create a wireframe. I know this is frustrating, but for now, let's just do it. Unless you're fine with having all of those extra wireframes added when you want to create your wireframe pass. So again, it's up to you. If you are dealing with lots and lots of wireframes, make sure that you select your geometry and go back to your non-smooth mode in order to have less wireframes, or the actual wireframes that are creating the object that you have in the scene. All right, so I think that's about it.